This program is underwritten by Sustainable Settings, a nonprofit organization devoted to harvesting nature's intelligence in its research and demonstration of sustainable human settlement. Sustainable Settings is supported by volunteering, the sale of our organic farm products, and your tax-deductible donation. Call 970-963-6107 and visit us on the web at www.sustainablesettings.org.
Hello, I'm Brook LeVan from Sustainable Settings, and welcome to GrassRoots. The show is called Sustainable Solutions. We have a guest with us today, Aaron Perry, who I've known for maybe we shouldn't say how long, but we can get to that maybe. But he's coming out with a new book. And I'm going to read a little something that I wrote when I was smarter this morning that I doubt I could say verbatim. So here we go. All humans evolved within complex land-based cultures over deep time to develop a brain with the capacity for over 100 trillion neural connections, of which we now use only a tiny fraction. Most of us have been displaced from those cultures of origin. A global diaspora of refugees severed not only from land, but from the sheer genius that comes from belonging in symbiotic relation to it. In most indigenous North American cultures, they tell stories, ancient narratives, to show us that if you do not move with the land will move you. There's really nothing permanent about settlements and the civilizations that spawn them. We too have our stories that have led us here today, that have allowed us to simplify the dynamic complexities that we have categorized and call nature. Inherent in this is a separation from creation. We have focused on human, my opinion, techno-fascism, imagining this is a way out of the mess that we have created with our technology. With all of our techno-hubris, we have as yet been able to detect high-tech alien civilizations. What has manifest and may very well be the reason for this failure are our unsustainable societies that do not last long enough to even leave a cosmic trace. Recent traditions have emerged that break down creation systems like a virus, infecting complex patterns with artificial simplicity, exercising a civilizing control over what some see as chaos. The Sumerians started it, the Romans perfected it, and the Anglosphere inherited it. The world is now mired in it. Indigenous wisdom teaches us that it is our ways, not our things, that ground us and sustain us. The war between good and evil is in reality an imposition of stupidity and simplicity over wisdom and complexity. AI, artificial intelligence. For some, it is the answer, our savior. For others, it is feared to no end and generates conspiracy theories of how we will be dominated by the machines that we devised to aid in our escape from the eco-disaster that we created, only to be hooked up to the matrix as embryonic energy cells. I'm here today with Aaron Perry, author of Why on Earth, a guidebook of self-awareness with solutions to how we might find our way out. Aaron now is offering up his first novel, Viriditas. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Brook.
You're welcome. So, in the storyline, you've utilized multicultural perspectives, indigenous, ancient, scripture, from many worldviews to build on and reveal to us kind of a pattern thinking process. It's my take on it. And for us then, I'm curious to know how that builds into a critique and also can lead us into a solution.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Brook. Yeah, I appreciate that. So one of the things that emerges when we're looking at the patterns of culture around the world and through time, and I love your use of deep time, because there's a misperception that can emerge easily for us, which is that our entire human experience is what's been chronicled or documented in written technology, when in fact we've got human civilization going much farther back in time than what we see in the documentary evidence and in the written evidence. And when we're looking at cultures with writing technology who build empires, we see a dominant pattern of alienation from the natural surroundings and a quest to basically dominate not only nature but also each other. And in the story, which is a really fun sort of action-packed adventure with our main character, Brigitte Sophia, we kick it off in New York City. But because she has to flee to Colorado and slow down in a very real way, she gets over time exposed to a new understanding of our history, and also a new understanding of how we got to where we are right now on the planet as a human species. And moreover, not only how we got into the major systemic pickles that are now staring us straight in the face across the entire planet, but also where the deep wisdom and the deep knowledge and the deep intelligence is highly accessible to us to get through some of these incredible challenges we're now facing.
Yeah. Your protagonist, correct?
Yeah.
Brigitte Sophia, yeah. Which is a name change for her in the book, in the story.
Yeah, yeah.
So she's Bridget first, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's the way you've developed her character, she's really reluctant to slow down and to accept, to look at what she doesn't know.
Yeah.
So she's coming from this knowing Western paradigm.
Yeah.
And so you gradually, she breaks down or wakes up.
Right.
Right, in this. And so, but there's a lot of physical challenges as well. And she's kind of a desk pilot.
Yep.
You might say, a lab or a computer technician. What is
she is a super smart, a genius computer scientist and mathematician.
Okay.
And in the story, she has cracked the code to deep artificial intelligence, the singularity. And because of that, the way the plot kicks off is right after a meeting with a bunch of financiers who all happen to be men in New York City on the Upper East Side. She's walking back towards Central Park, back toward the Met, and suddenly she's being chased by these very scary paramilitary men, sinister men, clearly intent on getting a hold of what's in her mind, basically. And so she has to flee across the park, slip into the subway station just in the nick of time as a throng of people are coming up the stairs, which stops these larger men just because of the sheer mass of people. And she gets on the train in the nick of time and gets away and flies from JFK to the Denver International Airport right here in Colorado. And she has to go off grid. She has to ditch all of her technology because she's easily tracked through that, which is very uncomfortable for her. And you can imagine she's been in this world, predominantly male world of computer science, STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, and has had to put up with a lot of nonsense over the years, and has developed ways to feel in control. And so now to be sort of on the run without any technology, and moreover to have to depend on this wacky kind of guy she meets up with in Boulder, Colorado, a friend of a friend, she's in a very, very vulnerable position. And yeah, you're right. As she gets exposed to these different systems of thought and knowledge and wisdom and traditions, she's initially coming at this with a lot of skepticism, because this isn't in the milieu or the paradigm that is germane to normal science and technology expertise. So through that kind of breaking down and awakening and opening up, she basically becomes our guide as the reader, as the audience, to understanding what might really be possible in all of this unfolding we're participating in on the planet, and where we might be able to go with it.
So really, she is like a lot of us.
Yeah.
We're disconnected from these things. Yeah. You know, we've dismissed them, all these other ways of seeing the world and operating and gaining wisdom and knowledge, right? Yeah. We think it's all on Google, or it can be tracked like that. And so what I don't know that I'm the norm, but I did kind of put myself in kind of the average Joe Bag of Donuts, kind of position, and it's like, she's really us, having to rediscover a lot of these other ways of understanding the world. Right? Yeah. And so she meets this guy, and so there's that level of her character that you just described, and then there's this whole other level of her internal trust of men, or her understanding of herself, and opening up to really another person.
Right.
And so what happens?
Yeah. I mean,
I don't want to give
we don't want to give too much away, but you can imagine she's very reluctant not only to trust this guy, and I don't blame her. I mean, look, if we were in a similar situation, it'd be hard to trust anybody.
Who do you trust?
Who do you trust?
Right.
We don't even know who's chasing her.
That's right.
Right? Is this the deep state of the United States? Is this the Russian mafia? Is this the Israeli intelligence force? We have no idea who it is. Is it some weird paramilitary arm of one of the tech giants on the planet? We don't know. So it's a very scary time for her. And moreover, she encounters this kind of wacky, enigmatic guy, and a friend of a friend who sort of has reluctantly agreed to help her out because his buddy asked. And
wait, so he's willing to risk helping her too?
Yeah.
Does he know what is happening to her?
It begins to unfold as they're spending time together in the first few days.
I mean, she's being chased, and he's putting himself at risk.
Very much, right?
But
it's potentially
he's pretty
very
chill
dangerous.
about that.
Well, he's kind of a calm guy, I guess you could say. And moreover, one of the things he does instinctively to help her calm down is not only go to a few of the known sort of herbal essences and simple natural things to help calm the nerves, but he also takes her to his friend's regenerative farm a little outside of the city and up into the wilderness outside of Nederland, Colorado, if anyone's familiar with that area. And then, of course, eventually they end up here in the Roaring Fork Valley. We're having this discussion right now in Aspen, and they end up actually flying into the Aspen airport through a series of events, and then get down valley and spend time at Sustainable Settings, which you are the executive director of, and where I worked a couple decades ago.
By the way, I love that I'm fictional character now.
Yeah, no, it's, part of what's fun about the book here is that, not only does it weave together a good bit of indigenous knowledge and wisdom and esoteric and spiritual knowledge and wisdom from a number of different cultures, it is also a documentary of sorts. And I mention all kinds of very real people and very real places and very real organizations who are helping to work through this massive systemic conundrum we're facing as a species on the planet. And so for me, it's a lot of fun to be able to talk about my friend Brook as an author and present you in a way that the audience can experience in a quick fashion. And then, of course, when they drop into Sustainable Settings, they happen to arrive there while there's a permadynamics workshop underway, permaculture and biodynamics. And so the reader, through the course of the story, is getting an introductory exposure to some of these regenerative and advanced land stewardship and food production techniques, basically. So there's, in a way, a lot of education woven into this as well, but all in the context of a fun, exciting story, kind of like Dan Brown, on the one hand meets, Starhawk's fifth sacred thing on the other.
Right.
But all that is just building up to the big message in the story, which comes at the end. And it's hard talking about it right now, because I know we don't want to give too much away, but
Right.
but there's really some extraordinary stuff that shows up.
Character
in the end.
development is a good place to be, and
Yeah.
so there's this multi-layered becoming kind of issues in her, but also the guy, and many others around them.
Yeah.
But she does leave this whole corporate, contemporary Western paradigm, really, and goes out on the fringe, in the margins.
Yeah.
And that's something that I liked about the book, too, is that you brought us into the margins, and you're showing us how to harvest. There are fringes in the culture. There are people working on these alternative solutions, but they are very small and they are marginal, or but they, you bring us into these other possibilities that are active.
Yeah, truly active and emerging, and I think gaining in momentum all around the planet. And as you know, and you've been on my podcast, I have the opportunity to interact with and interview and collaborate with all kinds of leaders and organizations around the world working on these issues: social justice, environmental stewardship, and regeneration, and so on. And there is so much positive emergent energy now already underway in our world. And it really becomes a question of what is becoming more central in our modus operandi as a species, what is becoming our primary guiding light in our economy, in our cultural fabrics. And we basically have a big question in front of us as people. And this book essentially is entertaining that big question or set of questions. And so, yes, she as a character, Brigitte Sophia, and she has to switch names because she's gone off grid, basically, and they don't want to leave any additional information that might lead her pursuers to her. So she switches from her first name, Brigitte, to her middle name, Sophia, which, of course, is the female wisdom in meaning, the name Sophia. And as she's going through this experience, she's dropping out of her head, out of the intellect, out of the urban consciousness, which we all have to a certain degree, many of us almost exclusively, into her body, into her heart. And as she's going through her experiences, not only to the fringe, but into the wilderness for a while, she drops deeply into her body and almost gets to know her body as a being as she had never previously known it.
No way ever did,
And in a sense, I think it's no stretch to look through the historical literature, the archives, and more contemporary work in the realms of things like eco-psychology, that very much it is our bodies and the knowledge and wisdom that flows through our bodies that is the analog for the knowledge and the wisdom that flows through planet Earth, Mother Earth. And when we get into neural networks and we get into what's really happening in the living biosphere, we essentially all inhabit a mega super duper uber computer, if you want to think of it that way. And
like Google is a joke.
A joke.
The internet is child's play compared to what we're talking about.
Yeah, the neural capacity of the living biosphere is so tremendous. Yeah. And we as humans have an opportunity to connect directly with that. Our ancestors, by definition, being in deep culture, living close with the land over time, as you mentioned at the outset, our ancestors were cultivating that relationship. They had that. It's a matter of how far back in time we have to go for our own particular lineages or mixes of lineages to rediscover that. But we have right now as human beings, as part of our birthright, by virtue of being alive on the planet, we have the innate ability in our own inner technology, our own inner complexity, to connect with the living intelligence of the biosphere.
We're out of practice, of course, but we are amazing beings. And
Truly.
I know one of our essential questions at Sustainable Settings is, what are we capable of?
Yeah.
And that can be taken on a horizontal level, physically mentally or intelligently designing systems, knock on wood, physical systems, but it also is about our soul and our spirit and our etheric body.
Yes.
And those bodies, and that we actually are amazing, and we're just not taught how we can work on these other levels.
Yeah, and look, there may or may not be a chapter titled "What Are We Really Capable of?" In the book, in the story.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, my friends and relatives in the Mohawk tradition and people out in upstate New York in the borderlands with Canada, I'm part Mohawk in my own ethnic makeup, are still very much connected to the know-how, the knowledge, the fabric weaving capabilities that we have in our relationship with the living biosphere. And yeah, it's the trees and the plants and the animals, but it's also the wind and the water and the light continuously streaming onto our earth from the sun. 173,000 terawatts of energy continuously, uninterrupted, streaming as long as we humans have been here, and it seems it's going to continue for a while.
Yeah.
This is the reality, and I love some of my friends when they hear a bit about it or start reading the story will say, "Oh, this is like science fiction, isn't it?" And I say, it's kind of like science fiction, but really it's probably more like science reality.
Yeah.
And I think one of the really exciting, kind of getting a little geeky here and nerding out a little bit, one of the really exciting things about being alive right now, Brook, is that in many respects across disciplines, the science is actually indeed starting to catch up to and with the esoteric traditions and the indigenous traditions that have been around for thousands and thousands of years.
Well,
so yeah, we're not making all this up right now.
Yeah, I mean, I say 1650, we threw the baby out with the bathwater with the Enlightenment. We just dismissed everything that was combined, the mythology or the creation stories were combining fact and fiction. And in there was the way to pass wisdom on and, metaphor and these things as a vehicle. And so once we said science and repeatability and reduction and ism and all these other things, all that was spooky, or that was, not. And so what we're doing is science isn't bad.
Right.
It is our current imagination, but it's time to bring them back together. And that's what you do in
Viriditas.
Viriditas.
Yeah, Viriditas. Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. So
Yeah.
the term, actually, this is probably important to mention. So Viriditas is a term that was coined by Hildegard von Bingen about 900 years ago, and she is a pretty well-known German mystic who, for her time, especially as a woman, was an extraordinary figure. She was friends with Bernard de Clairvaux. They had a correspondence over years, whom some of you may know from some of the esoteric circles connected to the Knights Templar and so on. And this term Viriditas means the green healing energy of the divine, of God, that flows through plants in particular. And you'll see in the story there's some binary code and some other cipher-coded messages, and including inside the book itself, using a certain cipher code that goes back centuries, probably initially created by a number of Hebrew rabbis and then probably adopted by the Knights Templar almost 1,000 years ago, not quite. And then more recently, it's something, in fact, the Freemasons have been using for a number of centuries. So for the folks who like to have a few puzzles to unpack in a story, there's some additional hidden messages and so on. But you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You'll get the gist of the overall message and download and revelation without it. But there's some extra goodies for those who like to go a little further off trail.
So these are at the bottom of pages, or they're in, what do you call it, captions?
Yeah, bottom of pages, captions, and occasionally you'll even have a couple full pages of cipher-coded messaging at the beginning and the end.
There's something there.
There's something there for sure,
okay.
for sure.
How do we decode?
Yeah, so actually this is kind of fun. My younger friends would say in a way this is some gamification, which we humans, we like storytelling, we like games. So yeah, if you want to engage with us, with Viriditas and with the Y on Earth community, you can go to viriditas-society.org and connect, join the email list and so on, and we'll share ways you can actually get the cipher key and decode everything for yourself if you want to. And the other thing we're doing, Brook, that I know we'll be talking about a little bit is through our Y on Earth community work, where we're providing all kinds of curated experiences, workshops, and a variety of resources print, digital, and otherwise, including our podcast series for health and wellness on the one hand and stewardship, regeneration, and sustainability on the other, we are launching a new body called the Viriditas Society for folks who want to take an even deeper dive into some of the ceremonial arts, working more deeply with the biodynamic land medicines, with the sound healing practices, sacred geometry, and some of these other long traditions coming to us from hundreds of generations before us.
So let me make it clear
Yeah.
to the audience.
Yeah.
Why on earth
Yeah.
you wrote, and it became Why on Earth
Community.
Community.
Yeah, it's our nonprofit educational organization.
Okay.
Yep.
And that is really about bringing making these things we're talking about practical.
Super practical.
And even more
Yep.
so here, the more fringe or marginal, what we might say marginal aspects
Yep.
that are ancient,
Yep.
but marginal today. So the Viriditas Society is intended. So this has birthed a whole nother working
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah, yeah, within the body of the Y on Earth community,
Okay.
for sure. But yeah, and it's interesting. I'm struck by your use of the term marginal and fringe, right? Because we learn in some of the ecology practices that it is at the edges, the margins between, say, the forest and the river, or the desert and the prairies, that we find the greatest biodiversity, generally speaking.
This is a permaculture ethic or
Yeah.
principle.
Yeah.
It's the edge effect.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
exactly. And so, yeah, it's interesting to me to think about this as the marginal sort of cultural experiences. And, many of us have grown up in a milieu that is highly urbanized, no doubt about it, highly intellectual, no doubt about it, highly technocentric, no doubt about it.
Linear and reductive.
Linear and reductive, yep. And thanks to the Enlightenment, that's a perfect
Yep.
way of orienting that historically. And the Enlightenment gave us a lot of really good things too. For example, democracy and some of these traditions that we've been able to proliferate. Now, of course, as you'll learn in the book, there are some subtler aspects to even those stories we're not necessarily taught in fifth grade history class, which, for example, Ben Franklin and those founders and framers of the Constitution spending some time with the Mohawk people and in being inspired by a version of democracy that's even much older than the European version that emerged about 300 or so years ago. And so these fringes nowadays, Brook, is where I think there's a whole lot of super exciting energy and activity underway, because not only do we have sustainable settings, but we have a number of other biodynamic and regenerative farms and projects emerging just here in Colorado. And this is happening all around the planet. And as we're waking up as a species and understanding connections between clean water, and I mean really clean water and really clean food, the way our ancestors had it, and our own well-being and cognitive performance, for example, and immune system function, for example, we begin connecting those dots, and we get to experience and realize and share with each other levels of empowerment and sovereignty and creative expression that, unfortunately, I would say many of us today are not even necessarily understanding to be possible. So,
So
when
we
you're
might just rediscover
Yeah.
thriving,
exactly,
not just existing,
it's in our DNA.
not just getting by,
It's in our DNA.
existing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're, is it a Masonic brother? What is the?
Well, so I'm friends and connected with all kinds of different traditions and lineages. I have a lot of Masonic friends and brothers. I had the privilege and benefit of a Jesuit education in my high school years and remain friends with a number of my Jesuits, which is kind of funny because the Masons and Jesuits have been at odds over the last few centuries. There's some really interesting history there.
But this is our job, is to synergize all these great things. Right?
Yeah, look, my sense is most all of the traditions have beautiful wisdom and have love at their core. I mean, the Jesuits and the teachings of Jesus, the Masons and the three principal tenets of truth, love, charity, etc. And there's a deep humanistic, love-centric core teaching in these different institutions, it seems.
Really in all doctrines.
It seems.
Right.
And what happens with this civilizing effect where we start walling off our territories and we start seeing the forest not as relationships, but as so many timber, cords or board feet of timber.
Board feet, yeah.
A profound but often subtle thing happens in our psycho-spiritual well-being, and we become diseased. And I think that it's the forces seeking more power, often out of fear, and the fear is understandable, that ends up turning these institutions into bodies and vehicles for some pretty nasty stuff to happen. And look, just this week, Pope Francis is touring in Canada to make apology, to atone for the horrific treatment of Indigenous peoples all across that part of the continent. My own Mohawk friends experienced some of these language schools, my age, in their early years.
Wait a minute.
And
is he going back to the doctrine of discovery?
The doctrine of discovery, exactly. This is promulgated by the papacy about 500 or so years ago, essentially saying, effectively, all non-white Europeans are subhuman and therefore subject to A, B, and C, right? And it was actually that informed the legal underpinnings of Anglo law that led into some of the underpinnings of American law.
Our whole concept of ownership is based on this 1493 document that was written after Columbus got back, right?
Right.
Right.
And there's this sense that there was this prevailing sense coming out of Europe, which was just full of horrors in the centuries leading up to the age of conquest.
Right.
And it was as if we, in these wooden ships with beautiful sails, we were exporting cultural trauma all around the planet and visiting incredible cruelty on people living all around the world. And in doing so, really, really destructive to a lot of cultural fabric. Fortunately, not entirely obliterating the cultural fabrics, but very destructive to peoples and cultures. And so I think a big part of what's available to us today is a resurrecting, a rebirthing, a healing of a lot of those wounds. And as I mentioned, the Pope is doing that right now on behalf of the Catholic Church, right? Which 1 out of 8 people on the planet identify with, not a small potatoes organization, from what I gather.
Yeah. So is this turning into a return of land, or what is it? Just an apology? Or
we don't know that, and many of the indigenous leaders are asking those
at
questions.
least of an awareness.
Yeah, the acknowledgement, I think, is the first step.
Yeah.
So there's bits of that kind of stuff sprinkled in here, little bits of history, but it's not going to bludgeon you over the head with. This isn't attempting to be some graduate course in history. It's really attempting to sprinkle in a few bits of perspective to create the context to really help people understand how did we get to where we are right now.
Right.
And I think some of those stories and some of what has unfolded over the last several centuries and even millennia is essential to understanding how we got to where we are right now.
And so I made a note that you're navigating the knife edge of fiction and prophecy, and we could say nonfiction too, I guess.
Right, yeah.
But this is not just, I would say it's an eco-thriller, maybe. Categories are strange, but there's solutions. There are solutions. It isn't just we're going out.
Right.
We're gonna wipe out ourselves, and so it's about hope.
Yeah.
Along, eventually, somewhere in the story, and a twist.
Yeah.
That I was surprised about.
Yeah.
And readers, you have to go there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's very curious merger of things, and so I'm dancing around revealing, but I don't know if you want to go there anymore.
Well, yeah, I think that the story is certainly not dystopic.
Right.
Right, and we have an.
It begins that way.
It feels like it might go that direction.
Yeah.
We're
toast.
We're toast.
Yeah.
And I would posit to our audience that right now in our culture, we have an overabundance of dystopic stories. And one of the powerful things about storytelling is it may just be one of the ways we create our futures together, and one of the ways we create our cultures together. And so as we're telling these stories, it may just be we actually have great responsibility in what stories we're telling and how we're telling them. And yeah, there is a lot of hope running through this story. And the crescendo, the revelation that comes through at the end of this story is something I'm excited for a lot of people to experience. Already we've got many friends and colleagues who have read it and are moved by it. And my hope, my prayer, my joyful labor with all of this, Brooke, is that this story is actually going to be really helpful to a whole lot of us, and helpful to our culture as a whole. And so yeah, there is a huge reveal in the course of the third part of the book, and the third and final part of the book. And it's a lot of fun knowing what's in there. And I really encourage folks to check it out. You know, Viriditas-Society.org will get you there. Or if you want to use ViriditasBook.com, I think it'll also get you there if that's easier. VIRIDITAS. And yeah, experience what might be possible. And the subtitle of the story is "The Great Healing is Within Our Power." And so there's a sense of there probably is a really beautiful shared future that is possible. However, if we all kind of kick back and don't lean in or don't engage and don't act and don't work on the internal healing that leads to the external healing in the world, we may not get there. So it's not a given, but it's certainly a possibility. And so my sense as an author and as an activist in the community like you, Brooke, is that as enough of us get activated around these stories, we actually get to create the kind of world and future together that we hope for. And that's the horse I'm betting on. And I'm hoping a lot of others are going to go that way too. And of course, we're seeing hundreds and thousands of folks already showing that in their own lives and in their own work all around the planet.
With their own projects.
Yep.
So, Viriditas Society.
Yes.
On the way up, driving up for the interview today, you talked about the scope of that.
Yeah.
Can you share that?
You bet.
What you see is, how it would function and
Yeah, we're really excited about some of the things that we are cultivating right now with the Viriditas Society, which is a new emerging body within the Y on Earth community ecosystem, and where with Y on Earth we're very diversified in reaching academic audiences, reaching faith communities, doing workshops all around the country and even internationally with a variety of different
podcasts,
organizations. Yeah, podcasts, books, all kinds of video
workshops,
resources, workshops that we do in person, retreats, even leadership retreats. We'll be doing some more of that also over the coming months. And in addition to that, we're with the Viriditas Society dropping into an even more sacred vessel of ceremony and intentionality. And it's really deepening in our devotion to this healing work, healing of ourselves and of our communities and of our world. And we have in our indigenous friends and relatives, folks who are excited to share some of their knowledge, and others who are carrying esoteric wisdom and knowledge as well. And so it's a bit deeper in fellowship building with our beloved brothers and our sacred sisters. And one of the pieces that we're holding in that vision is creating a center somewhere in the West where we'll have demonstration of a lot of these different modalities and techniques and traditions in a gathering place, and potentially even a whole network of such centers where we can each kind of unplug from mainstream world and connect in more deeply with nature and with each other. And we're also cooking up a number of really exciting things in the realm of regenerative economics, which is one of my favorite subjects and topics, and something I studied it pretty extensively in graduate school.
Give me a little bite on that.
Yeah, so as we're reformatting our economy so that the mammonic forces of fear, greed, control, and power are descending, and the love and stewardship oriented forces are ascending. We've got to rework literally how we structure our businesses, how we go about conducting the business of providing each other goods and services. And we already have a number of wonderful examples. Dr. Bronner's out there, Patagonia, and many others whom we collaborate with through the Y on Earth community. And our sense is we're about to experience an incredible upsurge of regenerative cooperative models, social enterprise models, and others who are taking the structural steps in their accounting, legal, and business operation guidelines to become forces that are much more oriented toward health, wellness, social equity, and environmental sustainability than what we've seen in the mainstream over the last several centuries. Look, it's no secret, I think, to most of us that the nation as great as the United States has certainly done a lot of good in the world, and our economy was founded on a slave-based, continental-wide genocide, massive resource extraction foundation. And it's not necessarily that we need to debate the sort of pros and cons of what's occurred in the past, but that we focus on, hey, we can be doing this a lot better going forward. And the great news is there's already a number of shining examples. And the Mondragon cooperatives over in Europe and Spain are another beautiful system and example for us to look at and emulate. But so yeah, we're not only working with the ceremonial arts and the esoteric and indigenous knowledge and life ways, but we're also very much engaged in the economics, the business of helping to transform our economy and our culture that way too.
Is looking at what might be enough part of that model?
Absolutely.
Meaning the accumulation of growth and unlimited wealth, or hey, it's enough, and more people can have a bit of a take in this.
Truly, and I, of course, was just on a several-day retreat with my beloved Caressa, and we got some time to sit in the woods and sit at the ocean and be and listen. And it was striking me over and over that as more of us slow down and really engage with nature around us, whether we're in desert regions or forest regions, temperate, tropical, whatever it might be, as more of us are doing that with our time, we're going to, by definition, be consuming less. We're going to be shopping less, because when you're in the woods, hopefully you're not also shopping, right?
We'll be making different decisions.
Very different decisions. And it's in our slowing down that not only, I think, recalibrates the economic metabolism or velocity, but is also recalibrating our own neurobiochemical well-being. And what's really kind of tricky and awesome and exciting about this whole thing is with certain healing modalities, from sound healing to EMDR, Jin Shin Jitsu, and others, we actually have an ability as human beings to dramatically heal and bring our nervous systems, our neurobiochemical systems into balance within ourselves, and begin our decision making and our practices of our day-to-day lifestyles from a much calmer, more connected, and less trauma-motivated way of living, basically. And so that's why when we're talking about the importance of the internal healing, it's not cliche. It's not hyperbole. It's not an exaggeration. It literally is the key to unlocking an entire world of joy and well-being and tranquility from which
we can ignore
work.
Those things, those pressures and stresses, which become cancers and other problems in our beings, or we can wake up to them and have a better daily life.
Yeah. If you're into quality of life, check this book out. Seriously, like seriously.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, how much does a book cost? And how much are we spending right now in our culture on attempting to not only experience but maintain a certain quality of life? And I think it turns out there's a whole lot available right at our fingertips that doesn't actually cost a whole lot of money.
Right. That's the problem. It's free.
Well, maybe it's not quite free. I don't know.
But you know what I'm saying.
It's
If we can't commoditize it in our current system,
yeah.
this might be a bit of a project.
You might not hear about it on the advertising spot around the 6 o'clock sock it to you, fear-inducing cortisol
Buy this
pumping
thing.
news. Like you might not.
Yeah.
Right. There may not be millions for someone to make there.
So these are big shifts that need to happen too. Is there anything else you want to get at? We're kind of close to a wrap.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity, Brook, to be here and to share a bit about Viriditas, and the opportunity also to have worked with you and collaborated with you over the years has been a great source of joy and meaning. And with a book like this, part of what's been really fun is it's an opportunity to pay homage and give some props to you and many others who are helping to lead this transformation, this evolution of human psycho-spiritual consciousness that's underway. And so it's a big thanks to you for all of that. And yeah, my hope is that if you're watching this or listening to this, you'll check this out, this book, and it might just change your life in a profound way.
So, read Viriditas. The subtitle, The Great Healing is Within Our Power, by Aaron Perry. This is Brook LeVan. I'm with Sustainable Solutions at Sustainable Settings down in Carbondale. And thank you, GrassRoots, for this time. And thank you, Aspen community.